This recording was retrieved from a private residence following an anonymous tip. The subject appears to be a male in his late 30s, speaking alone in what seems to be a storage room. The confession was recorded on a portable device, time-stamped at 3:42 a.m. The following is the unaltered audio transcription.
He stopped coughing just before the thunder struck. I'd been awake for a while. His coughing had become a constant, like a broken clock trying to tell time. Sometimes it came dry, sometimes rattling, as if his chest was trying to spit out its own soul. I can't say exactly how long he'd been like that. Maybe hours. I counted 5 thunderclaps before I registered the silence. On the 6th, everything vanished. It felt rehearsed. The thunder rolled in heavy and low, and in the moment between its echo dying away and the next crack, I realized there was no more cough. I tried not to move. I lay still, listening more intently than I ever had. The silence was hard, as though it carried weight, like the absence of sound was screaming at me. His bed creaked sometimes, even when no one was there. But that night, not a thing. Only the wind. The roofing would creaking softly, and a kind of void that felt like it was biting me from the inside. He always coughed. It was the first thing he did when he woke up, and the last thing before he fell asleep. Sometimes I thought it was the only steady thing in that house. So when it stopped, it was as if the world had switched off a light and left only darkness. I didn't feel relief. I didn't feel fear, either. It was something else, a kind of suspension, like when you accidentally stop breathing and your body notices too late. I stayed in the dark, eyes open, straining for anything that might prove I was wrong. A faint cough, a movement, anything. But there was nothing. Time passed slowly, but I knew it had been over an hour. I counted in my head, tracked the pauses between distant cars, waited for the time he usually took to get up and go to the bathroom, but he never did. I flipped the light on like someone stepping onto a minefield slowly. My hand shook, but it wasn't fear. It was habit resisting change. His room looked exactly the same. The water bottle on the nightstand, the radio switched off, the ashtray overflowing. And there he was, lying on his side, mouth slightly open. I crept closer. At first, I didn't touch him. I just stared, wondering if he was just sleeping deeply. But he never slept. That still there was always a snore, a jerk, a tickle of phlegm in his throat. This time, nothing, only the beat of my own heart. I pressed my fingers to his arm, cold, not frozen, but cold enough to know, to be certain. His skin felt like someone else's, pale, lifeless. The dry sweat on his temples, the hairs on his arms standing on end. It was as if his body had stopped working hours ago, and only now I'd allowed my brain to catch up. I didn't cry. I didn't get angry. I felt a different kind of exhaustion, as though something in me had gone out with him. I stood there longer, unsure whether to cover him, call someone, run away. I did nothing. I sat on the edge of the bed, hands in my lap, and stared at the wall. The room smelled of stale cigarette smoke, mixed with something metallic. The fan still turned slowly, humming softly. He always said he liked it running, even when it was cold. The strange part was that, looking at him, feeling his cold skin against my fingers, part of me still expected him to cough again. A startled gasp, a rattled spitty sound, as if this were just another long pause. But it wasn't. I knew. And the most absurd thing was that, for a moment, I felt peace, as if I could finally breathe again. I woke early the next morning. I hadn't slept, but I didn't stay in bed either. I went straight into the backyard. The sky was still overcast, but the heat rose off the earth. I walked toward the lemon tree without thinking. My legs seemed to know the way. My body understood before my mind. The shovel was there, leaning against the trunk, slightly crooked, its handle caked with old, dry dirt. He always left it there, half hidden in the shade of the leaves, like an extension of himself ready at hand. The wood was rough, cracked in places. It was an old shovel, one that had seen too much. I picked it up without hesitation. No doubt, no dilemma. It felt logical, inevitable. The soil was hard, but gave way under the blade. That corner of the yard was farthest from view, the back fence, where the weeds grew tall. He used to say it was where unwanted things went. As soon as the shovel pierced the ground, I heard it. My son. Just that. A low, clear whisper from somewhere between the lemon tree and the house. Not the wind, not rustling leaves. It was her, my mother's voice. She's been dead for 9 years? 10. But I'd recognize that voice anywhere. I froze. Sweat trickled down my back. My heart pounded, but I kept digging. I didn't answer. I just listened. I thought maybe it was my mind playing tricks, the trauma, exhaustion. But I wasn't afraid. It was more like a warning. Hey, I know what you're doing. And still, I kept going. Every time the shovel bit into the earth, I felt something pull me down with it, as though I were digging into myself. Maybe she knew. Maybe everyone knows, in some way. But her voice then was a last attempt to remind me there was another way. But there wasn't. Not for me. Not for him. The first minutes were brutal. Dirt flew from the blade in clods. I dug like I wanted to erase something, like the hole would swallow the memory, the body, everything. Anger drove me. Anger that wasn't just for last night, but for years of unspoken words, broken promises, all he'd done and let happen. I felt it in my arms, in my chest, my jaw clenched tight. But then, exhaustion, and with it, a strange calm. Anger became method. My movements slowed, became precise. I measured each strike with my eyes, adjusted my effort. I dug like someone who knew this work like it was part of an old routine. Underneath, the soil smelled rich, dark. I exhaled without realizing it, as if my body accepted what was coming. When the pit was deep enough, I stopped. I lowered the shovel. My arms ached, sweat blinded me, but there was a kind of relief, not happiness, not peace. A suspension like time itself paused, like everything that needed to disappear fit into that single hole. After digging, instinct took over. No thought. I already knew where he'd go. Not that corner by the fence. Not in the tangled weeds. It had to be there, where he sat every evening, the stone bench he'd placed beside the old chicken coop, facing the open part of the yard. He said he liked watching the sunset from there, but I know it was because he could see everything. The bench was damp even though it hadn't rained, as if it knew what was coming and had been waiting. Moss lined its edges, cracks barely visible but present. I sat before retrieving the body and stared at the sky. The clouds hung heavy, still. There was no breeze or trapped dense. The silence before change. He'd spent hours on that bench smoking in silence. Radio by his side, or nothing at all. I hated that place, how it seemed part of him. But now, it made sense. As if the circle were closing. As if the spot itself understood what was to come. Cigarette butts littered the ground. Dozens of them. Some old and half-buried. Others fresh. Squashed. Bent. Always the same brand. Marlboro Reds. He said weak cigarettes were for weak people. I hated the smell. Yet at that moment, the stink mingled with sweat, dirt, damp wood, and silence. And those butts. They seemed to stare back at me. Not crazy, just a feeling. Those little burnt stubs, wrinkled and bent, stuck upright. They looked like tiny eyes witnessing everything. Judging me, maybe. Or simply testifying. Each spent smoke carried a piece of him. Anger, unspoken words, aggression in a glance. They lay there like miniature graves, silent witnesses to who he was and who I'd become, to everything trapped in this yard. I wanted to kick them, gather and burn them. But I didn't. I left them scattered, small tombs of what he was, what I'd done, what remained. Even after he was gone, the smell lingered. I couldn't tell if it was the bench, his clothes, my memory, but it felt as though he'd lit one last cigarette, a farewell. Yet there was no ceremony, no prayer. Only the hiss of earth falling back into place, his weight slung over my shoulder, the bench watching. The stink clung to me, filled my lungs like it had when I was a child. I wondered if any neighbor would smell it, notice he was gone. But no one would ask. No one came here. He distanced himself from everyone. Now that smell was all that remained, reminding me who he'd been and what he made me do. After burying him, time warped. The sky darkened but delivered no rain, only distant thunder. Sometimes so near the windows shook. Each roll sounded like a muffled scream, stuck beneath the ground, as if he were down there trying to speak but had no voice, no strength. I'd stand in the hallway, peering at the yard through the curtain's slit. I imagined the earth giving way, the grave reopening, the body rising. That soil was too loose first to dry, then too wet. And the thunder. It seemed to want to pry open the ground by force, to shout what I was trying to silence. Sleep became impossible. Even when the noise ceased, I heard scraping, shifting. I didn't know if it was real or guilt. Maybe just fear, a fear that didn't come from outside, but from within, growing like an echo of him, an echo of me. On the third day, I went outside. The thunder had stopped, but the sky stayed gray. Around the bench the ground had sunk slightly, as though weightless absence had pulled it down. The depression was subtle, but visible. Earth, slightly damp, began to settle. It was as if the yard was digesting him slowly, absorbing all he had been. Harsh words, cold stares, nights he never returned, mornings he came back to drunk. The smell of alcohol, cigarette, disdain. It all seemed to seep into the soil, as though that patch of world knew exactly what to do with him. I stood and watched. I didn't fill it, or disguise it. It was more than a grave, it was a symbolic end. The earth was doing what I couldn't, all those years, silencing him, erasing his traces, turning presence into absence. In the days that followed, I slept little. I'd wake at every sound, at every roll of thunder. But the strangest thing was, I never dreamed of him. Not once. I expected to dream of his face, his voice, his laugh, but sleep came deep and imageless, only exhaustion. Maybe he knew there was no room left inside me. Maybe his memory had gone with him. Or maybe it lingered in the kitchen wall, on the sofas, stain, in the creak of the gate, on the stone bench, but not in my dreams. I lay staring at the ceiling, listening to the house's sounds, waiting to hear him cough, and heard nothing. His silence became my only companion, a thick, motionless quiet that weighed more than any word. It wasn't an accident, nor habit. I did it deliberately. I'd wake, heat water, grind coffee, set the table with 2 cups, the white one for me, the blue one for him. Its handle cracked. He said it brought luck. It never broke completely, just that hairline crack, tracing the curve like a scar. Every morning I set them both there. One for me, one for him. On the first day, I watched the steam rise from his cup. I didn't touch it. I just left it, like a ritual, as if it maintained order, balance. If I stopped, everything would collapse. And maybe deep down, it was guilt, or fear of forgetting too fast, or simply habit. Even bad things become routine. Some mornings I'd serve the coffee and leave the kitchen. Other times I'd sit, watching the liquid cool, the smoke vanish. A silent morning disguised as a mundane act. As if I needed him, there, or pretended he was still there then, knowing he wasn't. The day began with the radio button, a crackle, static, then the announcer's voice. Same tone, same news, accidents, politics, sports. In the middle of it, a strange space where the past still fought to breathe. He listened, as if it were a duty, muttering, sometimes laughing dryly. Then coffee. The sequence was exact. I kept it going for weeks, not to remember him, but to keep the world in place. If the radio played, if the coffee was on the table, then maybe everything would go on as before, even though he wasn't there to hear it. I listened to the headlines, as though filling the silence. But it was in the gaps between stories that I most heard him not speaking, just existing in the void, as if the radio spoke for him, as if routine still needed his ghostly presence to make sense. It was after the first week that I realized I'd started talking out loud, commenting on the coffee, criticizing the weather forecast, cussing the politicians, and replying in his voice. Not an imitation, but as if he were in my head, and I simply let him speak. This coffee's weak, huh? Blame the water, not the grounds. You should use a cloth filter, like before. You should have died long ago. Things that never happened, but that now played out every morning. I felt neither fear nor shame. It was automatic, a one-man theater, rehearsed for no one. Sometimes I laughed. Other times I'd trail off mid-sentence, as if he'd left again, as he used to when he abandoned the table without warning. And the strangest part, sometimes I missed his answer, even knowing it was me answering myself. One late afternoon, I heard it, the scratching of paws in the dirt, a dry, insistent sound. I went out to the yard and saw him there, digging by the henhouse among the twisted ferns. But it wasn't the right spot, not where I'd buried him. Still, my heart froze, because he seemed to know, to have found something. I approached, slowly. He growled, quiet at first, then louder. Not to guard what he unearthed, but to warn me off, as if I were the intruder, the mistake. He'd never done that before. He was an old, calm dog, almost lazy, but in that moment his eyes glinted, differently, as if he saw something I didn't. I stayed still. He stared for a few seconds, breathing hard, teeth bared, then went back to digging. Dirt flew, his nose and chest caked with soil. I called him twice. On the third, he stopped, but didn't come, didn't wag. He just sat, watching, and I felt exposed, as if he knew. knew everything I tried to hide. The next day, I filled his bowl until it nearly overflowed, added treats he loved, left it by the door, in the shade where he usually lay. He came, hesitant, sniffed, ate slowly. His tail didn't move. His eyes watched. It felt like a bribe, a bargain. For 3 days, I deferred food before he could remember to dig, played more, coaxed him inside. He complied, but never relaxed. Slept less, watched more. Every time I neared the back door, he trailed behind me. Never barked, just observed, with a taut calm, as though expecting something to surface from the soil. I never thought I'd have to deceive a dog. Yet in that yard, every gesture carried weight, and he seemed to sense it, as if he could smell what I'd buried not just in the ground, but in myself. On the 4th morning, I woke early, grabbed his red rubber chewbone gnawed at and battered and buried it by hand in the corner near the fence, by the lemon tree, just enough to conceal it, to confuse the scent. I came back inside and waited. When he emerged, he went straight to the wrong spot, sniffed, circled, then stopped. His snout turned toward the toy. He trotted over, sniffed, dug 2 shallow holes, then sat, just sat, staring. He didn't dig further. I don't know if it worked, if he believed it. But after that day, he never tried again. He stopped growling at me, ate calmly, slept in his usual spot, but I couldn't look at him the same way, because I knew that, somehow, he still knew. I discovered it by accident while dusting the bookshelves, those hardcovers he never read, bought for show, not interest. But that one, I remembered it. Sabra Sayer Pai, on being a father. He'd received it when I was 10, and never opened it. Just left it there like a joke. That day, I opened it. I don't know why. Maybe the title provoked me. Maybe something drew me. The cover was firm, pages yellowed, smelled of long confinement. I thumbed through and a folded paper fell out stained at the edges, delicate as paper ghosts. I picked it up gently. My heart pounded. The handwriting was his-tortured, cramped, each word an effort. He'd written it, hidden it, never given it to me. It didn't begin, "Dear son." No date, just raw text him. The scrawl trembled, as if he wrote in anger, because he was angry. Each sentence spat onto the page. What I was, and what I'd never be. How I'd disappointed him. How badly he'd tried to tolerate me. "You're weak. You never really listened. Maybe I should have left you with your mother." Harsh, cutting words I'd heard variants of out loud countless times, but seeing them written, deliberate, and secreted away, it was different. This wasn't a mere outburst. It was a record, a document of his contempt. And still, he never had the courage to hand it to me. He wrote it, folded it, put it back without a word. Maybe he regretted it. Maybe he forgot. I doubt it. He knew where it was. Knew I might find it someday. It was his twisted game. Hide the poison until the right moment. I sat on the living room floor, book open, letter in hand, and began to read aloud, softly, nearly a whisper, as though reading to him, as though he still sat in his armchair listening. His words hit differently when voiced. They gained weight, flesh, pain. Halfway through my voice cracked. Tears stung my eyes. My throat tightened. But I kept going, as if I needed to proclaim it to myself, to finally understand what he carried inside, and what he'd unloaded on me over the years. It was hate. Not explosive, but the slow, cold kind that grows imperceptibly and hides in small gestures. I reached the last line, and stopped. My hand shook, the paper slipping. I tucked it back into the book knot, out of respect, not out of fear, but because it didn't deserve burning or tearing. That letter was proof of who he'd been, of who I am, of why it ended like this. Then came a silence so sudden I thought it was relief, but it wasn't merely absence of sound. It was the presence of something unseen. In summer nights, the cicadas usually droned relentlessly, but now, nothing. As if even they had fled, or sensed something. I'd go out and sit on the back steps just to listen, and all I heard was weight, the air still, time frozen. That quiet was alive, guarding a secret, not exposing, but protecting a mute pact between me, the earth, and what lay buried. No birds dared the low branches. The dog no longer barked at midnight. Everything hung in suspension, as if that yard awaited something, or had finally fallen silent like him. After the letter, I began noticing the plants. Leaves thicker, branches sprawling, roots cracking the fence. The yard seemed nourished by something. Perhaps madness, but it felt as if the soil had consumed more than a body had swallowed anger. The letter, decades of neglect. The lemon tree turned a deeper green. Weeds overtook the back path. Even the roses that never bloomed began to flower wildly, recklessly, in excess of life, as though every plant cell responded to what had happened there. As if, freed from him, the yard could both breathe and devour. I let it grow unchecked. No pruning, no clearing. I let green overtake, cover, hide. But it was more than concealment. It was a living cover-up. The yard moving on its own, fed by ancient hunger, finally sated. One windless, stifling night, I slept soundly, no tossing, no terror, and in the morning realized I'd forgotten to lock the back door. Always locked since childhood, always locked after he died. But that night, I didn't bother, and nothing happened. No sound, no dream, no stirring in the yard. Only silence and a good tiredness, as if my body understood at last that the threat was gone, that the cycle had ended, that his voice wouldn't return, nor the smell, nor the cough. I felt no guilt for sleeping that well, only relief, as though I'd reclaimed my own home, as though that silence finally belonged to me and to the yard, now at peace. And so was I.